I was sitting with Barry Levinson as he viewed the actresses I'd put on tape for the role of Mrs. Ross in Disclosure. I liked one particular woman for the role, and even though I'd put stars against a couple of actresses' names, she was my favourite on the list, which I told Barry. At the very bottom of the list, I'd added a question mark, but no name. This was the recording my assistant Paul had made of me. I felt sure that Barry would simply pass over it, but he wanted to know why it was there. I said, "Oh, you don't need to bother about that. It was a mistake." "Oh, you piqued my curiosity now. Let me take a look." And there I was, cheeky as you like, giving my interpretation of Demi Moore's assistant, Mrs. Ross. "Oh, very good, Marie," Barry said, in what sounded like a somewhat patronising manner. "Oh, it's just a bit of fun," I told him. He simply nodded his head. Well, since he seemed to like the actress I'd recommended, I asked him if I should go ahead and book her. "Nah, I don't think so," he said. I was surprised and really disappointed, especially because the character, Mrs. Ross, was due to make an appearance the following week. I went back to the office and told Paul that Barry didn't like anyone we'd auditioned, so it was back to the drawing board. "Oh, he must have liked you, though, surely." "No, Paul, of course not." "Nice try, though. Thanks." The following day, I got a call from the costume designer, Gloria Gresham, who'd worked on most of Barry's movies, as well as When Harry Met Sally and A Few Good Men. She said she understood that I was playing the role of Mrs. Ross and wanted to know what my measurements were. "No, you've got it wrong, Gloria." "Well, Barry and Peter just told me you're Mrs. Ross." I was confused because this was the first I'd heard of it. I told Gloria that I'd call her back. Before I had the chance to clear up the mystery, Paul told me that the producer, Peter Giuliano, was on the other line. "Who's your agent, Marie?" Peter asked. "Oh, very funny, Peter." "No, I'm serious. Barry wants you to play Mrs. Ross. Gloria needs to get your wardrobe together, and I need to know your day rate." I hadn't heard a word from Barry, yet to my complete and utter astonishment, it seemed that he did indeed like me for the role of Mrs. Ross. My new actor's pay rate was agreed with Peter, and because Gloria liked a couple of outfits I'd recently bought for myself, I was set to go. I'd met Michael Douglas a couple of times, and in fact, Barry had asked me to read a scene between Michael's character and his wife in the script, with a view to maybe changing some of the dialogue. I liked Michael right away. He was down to earth and easy to talk to. Also very considerate, which I found out later. I hadn't been introduced to Demi Moore, but I respected her work ethic and the regiment she'd set for herself. She'd recently given birth to her third child, Tallulah, and before she came to the studio at 6:30 in the morning, she pumped breast milk for the baby into bottles, then spent almost 2 hours in the gym to try and lose some of her pregnancy weight. It worked, because from the beginning of the production to the end, Gloria and her wardrobe team were constantly having to alter Demi's clothes since she was shrinking. Soon the time came for me to film one of my scenes, which was with Michael and Demi. This is where I interrupt her in her office when she's just about to accost Michael's character, Tom. We would be shooting from my point of view as I enter the office, with the camera on Michael and Demi's characters. However, I still needed to be dressed as the character and go through makeup and hair to be authentic for the lead actors. I really was treated like a star myself. I had my own trailer on the Warner Brothers lot, which was almost as big as my apartment. If you haven't seen the film, Mrs. Ross's character is accused of having an alcohol problem. So from the moment I was cast, the crew teased me and constantly called me Alky. When I got the trailer, a couple of them would knock on my trailer door and ask if I could spare a drink. It was all very good-natured fun. Donald Sutherland was also in Disclosure, and I had previously approached him during a break and introduced myself. I reminded him that we'd worked together at the CBC in Toronto in the late 70s, that he'd given me his phone number and offered to be of help when I moved to Los Angeles. But by the look on his face, I could tell he didn't have a clue who I was. In fact, I thought he was quite rude, and I walked away pretty much with my tail between my legs. Later, we were sitting side by side in the makeup trailer, and I brought up the fact that we'd met when he starred in a film for CBC. I also expressed my sadness at the death of a couple of producers on that film, including John Hirsch, and he said that yes, it was a big loss. But most of the time he was quite aloof and didn't seem to want to chat about those days in Toronto. Obviously, he needed to concentrate on his character in Disclosure. Anyway, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. We were partners in makeup another time after that, and he said how he hated to see himself on film and rarely saw the films he'd appeared in. I think that's true of other actors too. I was certainly a shock when I saw myself up on the big screen, but I'll get to that later. A while before I'd reignited my acting career, I'd met a German woman by the name of Angelica Hansen at a Native American drum beating ceremony on Santa Monica Beach. Don't ask. It might have been winter solstice or something like that. Anyway, Angelica said she lived in San Diego but didn't want to drive back there, which meant she'd have to sleep in her car. Well, I said she could sleep on my couch for the night if she liked. She was a very vivacious, attractive and fiery woman in her late 40s, the kind of person who can always manage to wheedle her way into comfortable situations. Needless to say, her one night on my couch became several, and much more frequent after that. It turns out that she'd been a bit of an actress in Germany and had appeared in Federico Fellini's movie Casanova, starring Donald Sutherland. As I understand it, since I haven't seen the film, Angelica played a prostitute with a humpback. Well, it was Fellini. She didn't really have a humpback, by the way. Anyway, it seems that she was at very close and intimate quarters with Mr. Sutherland, or Casanova. I'm sure you can use your imagination. Although the film had been made almost 20 years earlier, Angelica had held a very deep regard for the actor, bordering on obsession. When she found out that I was working on the same film as Donald, she pleaded with me to take her to the set. Of course, I had no intention of doing that, but said I'd mention to him that she was staying with me and I'd pass on her regards. That's when I saw the fiery side of her personality. Regards? Regards? Send him my love and give him my phone number. I want to see him. Well, since she didn't have a phone, it was the mid-90s and cell phones were still a luxury, I would be passing on my home phone number. Angelica began to fantasize a life with Donald, regardless of the fact that he'd been married for many years to a lovely French-Canadian actress. Oh, it was meant to be, Marie, she insisted. I was meant to meet you so that I could be reunited with Donald again. She was ecstatic, on cloud 9. Oh, now my life is going to change big time. On the set the next day, I approached Donald and mentioned Angelica, not thinking for a minute that he'd remember who she was. Well, he hadn't remembered me. But that was not the case at all. His face lit up. "Angelica, how is she? Where is she?" I was flabbergasted at his enthusiastic response. I told him she was staying with me and gave him my phone number in case he wanted to call her there. "Yes, I definitely will," he declared. And he did. More on this story and my film debut next time. If you're enjoying my episodes, my social media guru, Horatio, has asked that you please like the recordings, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when I post my next episode on Sunday. Many thanks, and your support is greatly appreciated.